I want to thank everyone for being here. Many familiar faces in the space, so thank you all for joining us today for today's African Book Club. My name is Nia McAllister, and I'm the Public Programs Manager at MoAD. And as we gather here today, it's important to acknowledge that MoAD affirms Black Lives Matter and recognizes and condemns the ongoing systemic violence against Black people. We honor and mourn the senseless murders of George Floyd, Breonna Taylor, Ahmaud Arbery, Tony McDade, Casey Goodson Jr., Patrick Warren Sr., Andre Hill, Dante Wright, Anthony Thompson Jr., Ma'Khia Bryant, and so many others who've lost their lives in police brutality and racial injustice, including those whose names we do not know. MoAD's commitment to racial justice is ongoing, and as such, we will continue to say these names, to hold space and to honor these victims. I also want to acknowledge the spaces that we're occupying. Though we're gathered here virtually, we recognize that non-native people to this land are descendants of settler occupiers or those forcibly brought to this continent. MoAD occupies the unceded land of the Ramaytush Ohlone people, and we pay our respects to the Ohlone people and their elders, both past and present, who have stewarded this land throughout the generations. We encourage everyone to learn more about the native lands that you occupy by visiting nativeland.ca. So again, thank you all for being here for today's program. We here at MoAD are so fortunate to have been partnering with Faith Adiele, who is the co-founder of African Book Club since fall of 2019. And over this last more than year and a half, we've taken this program virtual, and we're very lucky to now have such a wide reach, reaching people nationally, internationally, and often having our authors join us. And so today we will be discussing the book, Walking on Cowrie Shells, Stories by Nana Nkweti. And we are so lucky that Nana will be joining us in just a few moments to be part of this discussion. And so Faith will be moderating the conversation directly with Nana. And we encourage everyone, if you have questions that you would like to ask the author, to please pass those along by putting them in the chat. You're welcome to either send them directly to Faith or put them in the chat publicly. And Faith will help moderate those and incorporate those into the conversation. And our author will be staying with us for about the first 45 minutes of the program, probably do a reading, be in conversation, and then the last half hour, we'll be able to kind of discuss amongst ourselves. And so be thinking about other topics and themes you wanna pull out from the book, any stories that have stood out to you. And when we're kind of in the group discussion, we encourage everyone to either raise your hand using the reactions or physically raise your hand just so we can moderate the conversation and make sure everyone's voice is heard. So again, kind of the step up, step back, make sure to give at least a couple of people a chance to share before speaking again. But I think we have a small group, so that should be pretty easy to facilitate and have everyone be able to contribute to the conversation. So with that, I'm excited to pass it off to Faith to get us started.
Am I the only one not hearing her?
No, Faith is frozen again.
Okay.
Now
there
we
you
can.
Okay. I've got an unstable internet as well. Oh joy. So what we can do. Okay, so she is at the door already. So party faces, everybody.
Doing my best.
Right, party pajamas. That was wonderful.
Woo!
That is funny. Okay. Oh, my Wi-Fi is crazy. And I'm thinking we should spotlight her too. Can you do that? Oh, she's still coming in, I think.
I have just the two of you on my.
Oh, are we pinned or
Yeah.
spotlighted? That we are?
On mine, at least.
Sam, I'm not seeing her yet.
Hi, did you want me to come in? I was just waiting in the back room.
Hi.
Hi, because you asked me to come in at 7:15, so I was just coming a little earlier, just like kind of hanging out in the background
Right, I
before it
know.
was time.
It's hard to sneak into Zoom because people,
Right?
right? It's not exactly the back of the room. So,
Yeah, I was just kind of like, the virtual back of the room, like kind of lurking, like with my camera off and everything. So
no, this is perfect because we had just gone over the procedures of what we're going to be doing, and so
okay.
there wasn't
Excellent,
time to
excellent.
do anything else anyway. So, welcome. We're so thrilled to have you here. Really appreciate you making time for us. My name's
Thank you.
Yeah. No, I'm just been so excited. We have a lot of friends in common, and so I've been so excited about this book. I think you went to school with Derek and Ya, who I know from back
Oh
in
my goodness, what a
yeah,
small world.
Derek's letter recommendation, actually. Uh,
Oh my goodness,
yeah,
Derek is like my little brother.
yeah. Oh, tell him to call me. You know,
He's working on that book so he can come and be here in this very platform with you guys
exactly.
next year.
Exactly. That's what we want. That's what we want. So, yeah, so it's so exciting. And yeah, I think Jane Chabadi had interviewed you and told me about the book a long time ago. And then Disha's an old friend of mine, and I love that she wrote about it for the Times. And just yeah, hearing about you through the Iowa Network. So I'm just so excited about this collection and so appreciative that you could come and be with us. So welcome.
Thank you all for having me. Thank you, Faith. Thank you, African Book Club. This is exciting.
Great, wonderful. Thanks so much. And Nia and Elizabeth, have you met them? They're my partners in crime here they're at MoAD, and yeah, it's partnered with African Book Club. So thank you so
I
much.
love the MoAD. I love how that just sounds like a badass biker club,
Exactly. It does. It does. Wonderful.
Sorry. That is literally my little alarm telling me, go on the call. Don't forget you.
Get with MoAD. Excellent. Well, can we start things off with getting you to read some of your beautiful words to us?
Absolutely. Do you all have any special requests for me? Is there a story that you in particular, Faith or Nia or Elizabeth or anybody in the MoAD family, was there something that you wanted to hear in my voice? I'm just asking because sometimes I end up reading the same stories over and over, and I try to, if I see the crowd and like, you talk about something more than another story more than the other one, then I end up reading from that to kind of feed into the conversation.
Right, right. I appreciate that. I really love Schoolyard Cannibal, and
Mm.
but just anything that's got a lot of, I mean, well, everything has a lot of voice to it. So
Yeah.
you know, so yeah, kinks. I don't know. Nia, did you have a request?
It's so hard to pick. I liked The Night Becomes Us as well.
Yeah.
Okay, well, I will read from Night Becomes Us then, and then if at any other point during our conversations, please feel free to say, hey, can we hear a little bit from that story? And
Right.
I am more than willing to give you a little tidbit of that. Let me see whether I want to read from the book. I'm going to go ahead and read the book. I think I have an excerpt on my computer, but I just want to make sure that I have a long enough excerpt. I won't go on too long. I'll just kind of give you guys a sense of the voice of the night is actually this kind of omniscient voice and has a lot of swagger to it. So when I read it, I end up like, usually I stand when I'm reading and you can see in my body language that I start to feeling myself, like looking like this. And it's so funny because like I often juxtapose like, different voices so people can get a sense of the range. So the last time I read Night Becomes Us, right then before that I had read The Devil is a Liar, which has this kind of lyrical and somatic voice. And I'm just like, there are hymns, there are hosannas, there are hallelujahs. And then people are expecting that. And then all of a sudden they see me go into this mode. So that's the kind of range and the array of voices. And they just kind of possess me. So you'll get a bit of that from the Zoom, but like I get a little bit movie when I'm reading. Night veils and reveals, her dark face tarted up with stars, neon lit, flossing, in alleys on corners, Users parlay with pushers. Johns politic with pimps, haggling for that discount strange. Hip hop and synth pop coat the stained glass windows of Cream, NYC's hottest new nightclub. A deconsecrated church where bouncers in muscle tees play St. Peter at the Pearlies. Access granted, access denied. Zainab, the ladies' room attendant, sees none of this from her perch on the high stool in the bathroom. Its inky lacquered black licorice walls shine like mirrors, yet reflect nothing. But it is her job to see, to be ever vigilant in attending to others. She offers a paper napkin, then a shoulder to lean on to a teary-eyed girl mumbling about that motherfucker who thinks he's the shit, but he ain't shit. The aforementioned motherfucker is in the VIP stash, blitzed on Ace of Spades, grinding on some shorty's fatty. At 3 a.m., he will wake up groggy, cuffed to a bedpost, wallet and Air King rollie long gone, remembering his girlfriend, his ex now probably, had slapped him on the dance floor, then stormed off to God knows where. Christ. Zainab is holding said girlfriend's hair back, a lace front weave unlacing in the steamy bathroom as the girl dry heaves into the sink. Preoccupied, she fails to see the woman in the purple sequin mini dress, stealing a fresh pack of spearmint and the $28 of her hard-earned tips from the countertop. Her dream fund money. Zainab had purchased everything on offer in this bathroom herself. The candy and gum, mouthwash and mints, the combs, hair gel, scrunchies, safety pins, tampons, Band-Aids, Kleenex, lip gloss, snacks, stain sticks, a lint brush, aspirin, and even antacids. Her tip jar is full to bursting with crumpled bills pulled from bras and teeny bedazzled clutches. She is well paid and well regarded for her insightful attentions. Her crazy glue fix-its for broken stilettos, plastic slippers ready should the bootleg shoe surgery go bust. There is lotion on hand she has, redolent of water lilies and lemongrass. An Appletini air freshener she spritz in each and every stall. A crystal garden of fragrances, designer perfumes and vintage atomizers, sourced at the variety store off the subway stop in her hood. So that is kind of like the voice of that. I feel like I wanted to be bebopping, but
it's so beautiful, so sensory. I just love that. I love that.
Thank you.
That's wonderful. And then of course then later how she's introduced through his point of view as, the girl who, spritzed him with was it hyacinth, and then, he's able to like find the will to live again. It's just such a kind of a beautiful touch how the smell comes back with that. So I really, really love that so much.
I'm trying to remember which part, like, who were you thinking about will to live again? I'm just not really sure. I'm not forgetting my own book.
yeah, there's the Egyptian guy, Said.
Oh yeah, no,
right. He's ready.
Well, that's interesting to me because, like, that was part of our conversation. Because Saeed seems like he's good. Like for me, like I never felt like he was a person. He seemed like he was kind of her rock in so many ways. But I love these conversations because sometimes, like readers will see something in a character or whether in the line that maybe they notice something that I didn't even like. I'm writing. They kind of catch something that perhaps was subterranean for even me. So
yeah, that's kind of a gift that you get from your readers. Well, I'm so glad that you brought up just kind of the language and how you try to even embody the language, because for me this book was just so much about language, and it's both cinematic and oral. It reminds me of oral, but also reminds me of what Toni Morrison says about orature, and it's just I would like read it over and over again because it was just dense with so many references and all the energy of like the mashups and the puns and the pop culture references that, the characters will kind of think through a full riff, just an aside, and then they'll come back to what they're saying. And of course, and then there's Broken, a little Ebo, some Hotep, some Blurred, some hip hop, K-pop, cinema, comic book. There's everything. And I love this. that you had the confidence to do this. Because I know when, you know, when I was going through graduate school, kind of trying to use these cultural specific references, you can get a lot of pushback from people saying that folks won't understand them because you're really pulling globally from so many different cultures. And so I was just wondering how you worked on your code, and you're also a teacher. How do you advise your students on, you know, coming up with like this culturally rich code?
I mean, it's interesting, you know, like I come, you know, I think I came to the workshop into my MFA program and came to literature or started publishing at a time when, you know, there was this idea of inclusivity or not just giving lip service to it was more paramount, right? So I came and I don't think that there was anything that the people could have done to, you know, to quash that in me anyway, because that was so strong. I mean, that kind of code switching, that kind of like movement between Pidgin English and African American vernacular English and French and Franglais, and that's very much me, my own upbringing, my own sense of self, and I felt, you know, that if I couldn't represent people who were like me or were interested in people, you know, who had the same similar stories, then who would, right? And you know, but like I said, I'm standing on the backs of so many people who have pushed for that. Like, you know, I think of Zora Neale Hurston, you know, privileging as an anthropologist and a writer, just privileging like kind of the, you know, the vernacular English of like Floridians from in places where she grew up, you know, and just like, you know, Black folks in the South, you know, and I think of Toni Morrison, and I think of even like, you know, I think of I'm thinking Marlon James with, you know, Jamaican patois. So there's so many people who have been doing that work, and Juno Diaz and what have you with you know, Spanish and Spanglish, you know, and I felt like, you know, I don't think there was anything that could have stopped me, even if somebody had said something to me, but it doesn't make any sense to me that anybody would, you know, I feel like through the characters, through the context, meaning is made, right? And even if something is not immediately, you know, clear to a reader, I hope that like as they move through the text, as they, you know, they gain a greater sense of the world, that like, you know, whatever one word or one catchphrase they couldn't catch immediately will start to kind of resonate, and like, you know, you make meaning. And that's just the nature of, you know, particularly the English language, right? I think of something like, you know, the word bling, right? You know, who knew what bling was before, you know, like some poor boys from New Orleans and that, you know, made up this word, and then just it became part of the, you know, the lexicon, right? So it's just, I feel that this language is meant to be pushed at and meant to be, you know, it's one of assimilation and just, you know, and calques and loan words. And I love that, you know, so I felt like particularly American English was a language and, you know, a space that I could feel like I could just do anything, you know, that, you know, struck me in terms of like word choice and diction, and it just serves the needs of the stories. It's also, you know, I think there's a beautiful musicality to all these different types and registers and language. So no one could have stopped me. It was just gonna happen. It was gonna happen.
That's fantastic. Thank you. Well, then I'm thinking about this also then a kind of in an identity sense, there's something going on too. And for me, as a African who was born and raised in white environments in the US, I really was so excited to see this book, and I just really related to all the different kind of cultural permutations and cultural negotiations that are going on, this really kind of hybrid identity thing. And at one point in the story you just read, Zainab says, America is a place to reconcile dueling selves. Um, and you know, so I think we expect those tensions to happen, but to me, I felt that it also kind of energized the literary project. This struggle to be enough is a really great place to begin the tension and drama in a story. So I was just wondering if you could talk about how to be Cameroonian enough, how to be American enough, how to be Black enough kind of fuels the, you know, the stories themselves for you.
Yeah, I mean, like much as you said from your own background, like that's one of the things about like being this kind of, you know, third culture kid, mixed culture. They're taking your culture from the home country of your parents and the culture of where you live and grew up, and you're kind of making this third space for that you inhabit. And it's like a wonderful hybrid, I think, you know, of, you know, you take the best and hopefully leave the, you know, the worst of any cultures, you try to kind of build this other identity for yourself. And so that, of course, has always fascinated me, the idea of that. And the idea of becoming, of course, that's something that you kind of grow into. So, and that kind of growth, that type of internal movement and seismic change is good fodder for literature, of course, and for story. And walking on Cowrie Shells, the title that comes from the last story in the book, Kinks. And as we see, that kind of idea of walking on cowrie shells, I was playing with the idea of walking on eggshells, the idea of feeling like you're feeling tentative, you're feeling unsure, you're moving in through space and time, but not everything is clear to you in terms of your path. And that's a feeling that is very universal. So the identity, idea of, national and ethnic identity, yes, that's specific, but the idea of feeling like unsure and tentative, like what you're supposed to be, I have that echoed in Rain Check at Mamokhan, where we just have a young girl trying to figure out, hey, can I be an artist? That's a Kunstler Roman, like the portrait of an artist as a young woman trying to figure out, can I privilege my artistic life when that's not necessarily a path that was, set out for me. A young woman becoming, we have a Mami Wata falling in love, tentative, unsure, right? In The Living Infinite. So that idea of struggling, figuring out where you belong, figuring out what you want is just something that, all of us have to grapple with. And that was kind of like the through line for me through the book.
Oh, you went out for a minute there. So, okay, so that was
Oh, sorry.
No, it froze. Okay, so I think you were saying that was the struggle was the through line through the book. But then it seems like, and then there's the intersectionality involved in so many of the characters being young women or girls, and so how the kind of genderized experience for the African girls, how that gets worked out as well, I think is interesting. And you've said that you're really interested in kind of portraying African women in their kind of full complexity.
I mean, absolutely. I'm an African woman. It is what it is, So I was a little bit like, a little bit biased. I wanted to show us that we contain multitudes, that we are, quite women-esque in who we are, That was like, I think that's like, let me just say, put that out there. Yes, that was my, diabolical agenda. It's just, right? I just had grown up seeing, like so many one-note depictions of who we are as a people. I grew up here in the States, and when I'm talking about seeing, those little starving African kids, that's what I grew up on, those telethons. That was sometimes the only imagery of Africa that I would receive from the Western media in an entire year. Now we're living in the heyday of the internet, I'm completely dating myself, but I feel like those who want to know, there's much more information that you have at your fingertips. You can go on YouTube and see so many young African creatives showing the fullness of the continent. And this is not to say everything is perfect, but the idea that everything is just in disarray all the time. That was what I grew up seeing, this very one note and singular narrative of an entire continent of people. So
yeah, you take it on in such great sly ways. There's the twisting of the photo, and then it turns out that her cousin is actually living her Instagram life, and
I literally went there and I was just like, oh, is this how we living out here? I remember going when I was 14, I moved to Africa, and I was like, we got a maid? It's just I don't even know. It's just so interesting to me. Even me and my, the kind of you get inculcated and brainwashed by some of the things that are received. And then you go and live on the continent and you're like, wow, you don't realize how much you kind of internalize in terms of this kind of portrayals and what have you. So it's a kind of unlearning that you have to do over,
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah. Even when you're struggling against it, it's just there.
And I thought I was woke. I thought I knew. I thought I knew better.
Exactly. Yeah. Yeah. And if you haven't been in a while, then you're like, oh my gosh.
Right.
Because there's something
Mhm.
about being like an immigrant or expat too, because like, because then things stay frozen in ether, and all these changes have happened and you're, fantasizing about something that like, has
Oh,
moved.
the great thing, like I said, because of the internet, like, like I think that happened more so like maybe in my parents' generation where they're like, like their idea of back home was romanticized and trapped in amber. And they were just like, oh, once we get ourselves together and get our degrees, we're going to go back home, right? But like now, like, like you can see in real time, what's happening, like literally, like, I call my cousins at home and they FaceTime me and their internet is better. Like, they got better reception than I do. Like, I'm just like, it's just an interesting, like, there's that wall of mystery is just not as present as I remember like even 10, 15 years ago. So.
Mm-mm. Interesting. Yeah. Oh, then it's making me wonder about when some of these stories were set, because one of the tensions that I really love is the tension between Africans and American blacks. And, of course, it's overt in Schoolyard Cannibal, but it seems to be a motif in the other stories as well. And, you know, I, I was noticing it a long time ago, but I felt really shy about writing about it because I had been raised outside of both the Nigerian and the Black American
Mm.
context. So it's like, well, who am I to be like, what's going on here? So I'm loving seeing it, the kind of satirical way you play on it. And I'm also thinking it's changed a bit now that it's really cool to be African too.
Mm,
I was just
mm.
wondering about how you approached that. Um,
Yeah, it was so interesting to me, right? Because part of me did not want to like Schoolyard Cannibal. I was almost not, it was almost not in the book because I was just like, I don't want people to know our business, it was very like, I feel like it's one of those things like you don't want to show those fissures or those cracks in the foundation because people, some will take advantage of that. But like that was very much, that was of all my stories. And that when you asked, you mentioned it, right? And you were like, oh, read that. I was like, I don't know if I can read that because it's very present to me. A lot of it was autobiographical. So
Mhm.
some of it is actually set at, in different times. And I tried to kind of nod to that by talking about the Soviets and, things of times past or what have you. But like, when I watched my young nieces going to school and this and like, and my fears for them, right? I realized that I hadn't necessarily that we were not there yet in terms of like I thought we were all kumbaya, my lord, and everything. But then,
Right.
I'd hear somebody say something or see something on television, that showed like these microaggressions were still very alive and well in terms of like not just like African Americans and Africans, but just like the depiction and the idea of Africa. Like even as much as there's so much information about like the continent and there's still like pervasive kind of like attitude and I just wanted to and I ended up wanting to explore that after all and just kind of say hey I know we think we're past it because like Africa is more cool and like people are more woke in general, but some of these things have like we can't just always slap like a oh we good on top of things. Like let's like look a little bit deeper, make sure that we're really good. I felt like it'd be a place just to kind of have those dialogues and conversations begin if like, even if people feel like they're past that and they're removed and they're like maybe they feel like they're post-national or whatever the case may be, that that doesn't exist in their family, that and I say this as somebody who has like who grew up in Washington DC and like was there till I was 14 years old, and like that was my upbringing, kind of being like for me blackness in America was or being American was being African American, right? Like that being a Black American that like I was not that African Americanness for me was like my parents are from Cameroon, but what I know of like what it means to be an American was received from my African American teachers, from all the people who raised me up and made me the person I was, and I wanted to honor that, but also think about like the ways in which like like there were those tensions that I wish weren't there, and that I see still coming out sometimes in weird spaces, and I'm just like, oh, we need to kind of figure out how to, to better come together, because it's one of those things that I'm not creating it, I'm just writing into it and writing about it. So I'm
Right.
hoping that dialogue can be part of that, the conversation, or something that happens when people read. So
That's great. Well, I'm glad you did include it because it was bold and it felt really personal and intimate and important, and I really appreciated it being there. So thank you.
yeah, I mean, one of the things my sister was just like, "Oh, you went there," and I was like, "Oh my God." Because I didn't, I don't want to feel like I'm like anybody to feel like I'm coming for anybody's neck, like, so I really tried to make sure that, like, and as much as I did, even when I was growing up, like trying to understand, like, why this tension existed, and like, yeah.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, because it's within a larger system that
Yes, yes, it is.
gives us information about each other. Yeah.
Mhm.
So yeah, exactly. We have two questions that are kind of about genre. So like Elizabeth is asking, is there a reason you wrote it as short stories? Um, and and I was just interested in kind of the idea of how you put the collection together in general, because it's so, all the reviews are talking about how, you try all these different genres, I mean, different points of view. The stories themselves have other found text in them, or there's the images, there's the epistolary, and I was just interested in the ontology of the collection itself, the decision to include different genres and styles as a single collection under the idea of walking under Cowrie Shells. And then maybe we could talk about what it is you love about short stories in general.
Sorry, can I ask, are people putting their questions in the chat?
They're
Or,
supposed to be.
oh, my bad. I didn't know, because I was just like,
They're
oh,
and then I'm relaying them to you, but they haven't done that yet,
okay.
is what I'm
Oh,
saying.
well,
So
hi, Elizabeth.
they're mine.
No, I just like, like, literally, like, so this is like this is what happened to me. Like, I've been doing virtual conversations my entire time. So I was like, oh, book club. People get to ask me directly, and I get to say, hey, Elizabeth, this is what I think. But it's okay. I know you have to kind of figure out a way to do, maintain, like, a sense of flow. But thank you for your question. So now thank you for telling me who, asked. For me, in terms of like the putting together a book, I wish I could say I had some kind of master plan, and that, that they're like, when you start to write into a space, these themes, don't necessarily see the forest for the trees. So I'm not even necessarily noticing all like these late motifs until like 2 or 3 stories later. I'm just like, oh, I wrote a lot about like families, or I wrote a lot of stories about like, African womanhood. You're not sitting there saying, I'm going to write about African womanhood. That was not me, setting out on this journey. I just wrote about things that interested me and that caught my attention or my fancy. I wrote about Comic-Con because I've been to Comic-Con and I'm a big old blurred. So it just ends up being like things where, like your lived experience, I'm sure your lived experience, a mixture of things that you've read and that interest you in the world, and that I've been in those African charismatic churches, in those spaces. I've been in, I haven't been in a zombie apocalypse, but I do love zombies. So, you know, I what happens to me as a writer is that, I try to kind of like, go where I feel passion and write into places where I feel joy. I'm very voice oriented, very voice driven. So often when I start writing a character, I'm not quite sure what their story is going to be. But their voice is so compelling that they start telling me things and just holding my hand and taking me all around the mulberry bush. And I'm just like, oh, is that what we're doing here? We're talking about zombies? And that's sometimes how it happens, I can't say that I said, oh, I'm going to write about a number of stories in one particular vein. It just so happened that fortunately for me, like, like the kind of the voiciness, the idea of like writing dense stories with very kind of strong representations of like African, and Black personhood, they ended up kind of giving a shape to the collection. But I didn't necessarily know, oh my goodness, I've written this amount of stories and now I'm done, and all these stories are of this type, I remember when I was thinking about shopping out the book, there was a lot of emphasis being put on linked short story collections.
Yeah.
And I was trying to like desperately to link my short stories and trying to say, oh, these stories about family, these are ones that are fantastical. And I realized like, if I worked with some people, like with a publisher or a press that understood that maybe that the link would be me, and that my interests, and the language, the voiciness, the privileging of a particular type of person and stories to be told would end up like being the link, right? So that's what kind of happened in my case, because I was just like, when I started working with Beowulf, they were just like, go more gonzo. You can put whatever you want in here. They didn't have. I didn't feel like I had to kind of start conforming things so they could fit a particular type of book.
Uh-huh. Uh-huh. Cool. Interesting. Thank you. Okay, well, in that case, let's hear from folks in the room. Everyone was being so well behaved and letting me do all the talking. I shall stop being a control freak and invite people to come up on stage now that I've had my my curiosity satisfied. So, Elizabeth, did you want to restate your question?
Sure, I would just say thank you for coming and thank you for
Thank
being
you for
here.
having me.
And my question was actually in response to you saying that you wanted to show the full complexity of African women. And so I'm wondering if for you that is one of the reasons why you chose to write stories, short stories, rather than a novel, because that gives you the opportunity to have multiple perspectives and more stories and more complexity than one longer novel, or if that didn't have anything to do with why you chose short stories.
I'm just naturally a short story teller. I have friends who are naturally novelists, and I have a novel that I've been working on, and but I really want to privilege the short story. It's just what it is. I mean, I'm a person who likes to kind of be in a space and these very interesting voices and conversations I have with these characters, they come to a natural end, and I'm just like, okay, bye. It was lovely talking to you, and that's just like my natural inclination. I think even in the novel, I end up doing some of that because I have multiple POVs and I move between spaces. You are correct. I do like the variety. I do love the idea of being in a space. Like I can now be at Comic-Con. I can now be and deal with magical realism in a Mami Wata. I could now look at Afro-Christian spiritual warfare, and that allowed me a kind of flexibility that I love, that you can move in those spaces in the short story. So I am a little bit more of a fan of the short story. That is correct. So
I think that's perfectly legit too.
mhm.
I want to add one more thing because of what you just said about the story tells you when it's over. And I was saying to Nia before we let everybody in that one of the things I really loved about these stories is how you ended them. That it always it felt like there was it was the right time to finish, but you hadn't sort of tied it up in a little bow. There was still, you know, interpretation to what happened next out there. And so I think that's a real art and I really appreciated it.
Oh, thank you so much. It's one of those things like especially with the short story, it puts that tension on it, that to kind of land and where do you land. But fortunately for me, like my characters tend to I'm never going to be like, and this is what happened to the baby when they had the ultrasound. Just that feels false. That doesn't feel, life is messy and unknown. And that's, when these characters are telling the story of their lives, right? Hopefully they come to some type of understanding. Not everything is going to be epiphanic, but something that feels right for them, even if they leave you and you never know what happened to that baby or what happened to, like what did this, Astrid ever become an artist. So that was, I just hope that that the very thing you're saying happens, that people feel like, they've had a meal and that they understand these characters and they want the best for them.
Mm-hmm. 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 Interesting. You have to be like, seems to me it's like fostering pets. Like you fall in love with them, you train them, and then you send them out into the world and you don't keep them. Like it's like creating this beautiful story world and then like letting it go. It seems like really brave. Like you're not spending a whole novel's worth with it, but you just then like set it in motion.
It's how I write naturally. But like I have had people say, "Oh my God, Nana, your stories are so dense. Do you want this to be a novel?" Because I do pack a lot. Like even my sentences, they do a lot of heavy lifting, you know. So, and I'm very intentional about that. You know, I feel like it's something that even I like about poetry, right? You know, that there are no filler words. You have to kind of, you know, pay attention, and it leads you to slow down and really to spend your time, you know, so that you don't miss anything. And I feel like by the time I'm spend all that time with the characters, like even just reading one page, I've been through so many emotions with them. I feel like I know them, and and when they say farewell, they say farewell. So
yeah.
There's one ending in particular that I found very, very moving. It's the ending of "It Just Kills You Inside."
Oh.
And you could read it or I could read it.
Oh, Pamela, I'm feeling like I want to hear your voice. You're very good. I'm like, yeah, can we do like a tandem read? Like, I really want to hear. I'm all excited about like Pamela reading my work now.
So this is the very last paragraph of the "It Just Kills You Inside" story, and it's on page 103. This is what we will tell the fair-haired father when he swoops in, cameras flashing, to collect his convalescing child. This is what we will tell you, the only truth you'll ever know. And you'll accept it because you once set out sugar cookies for Santa. You trust deeply in the power of your voice and your vote, and expect that when you die, when you are nothing but bone and bliss, there lies a new beginning, a sweet hereafter.
Oh my God, I'm so verklempt. Pamela, thank you for honoring me with your voice. I'm so touched. Wow. You see why I needed to hear you from you guys? I'm just like, that was beautiful. That was so beautiful. You know, you make those I mean, it's so interesting to me, like when readers, like, you know, the emphasis you put on certain words, it made it resonate for me in like whole new ways, you know.
Thank you. Thank you for writing it. Thank you for
Thank you. Yeah, it is. I love all of my stories, but that story, It Just Kills You Inside was like for the longest time was my it was like one of my longest stories, and it was so structurally, I was doing so much, but that voice was so strong and so resonant. You know, I really wanted to write this flim-flam man who plays with the truth and puts us in spaces and we believe him, you know, and then looking at the nature of like who is monstrous and what is monstrous and who's the monster, and just like deception. I just completely enjoyed being in that world. But like, you know, that structure, boy, that was a toughie to write. So I'm glad that, you know, that you got to the end and that it landed well for you.
Yeah, beautifully.
Wonderful. Ava, are you coming on?
Yeah, thank you so much for these stories. I really enjoyed reading this book, and my question, which I put in the chat, I'll just rephrase, is it was about the artwork. You know, it's fun. I've never seen this type of artwork in a collection of short stories before, and I wondered what that and it's some of the stories and not all, and it's sort of this eclectic mixture. And I wasn't sure if I just wondered what your process was. Was there some ekphrastic element to, like, did some of the art come first, or how did it come about, or were you envisioning it as you wrote, or something you saw inspired you and that inspired the writing? Or are you in collaboration with these visual artists? And you know, and they're all different visual media as well, from photographs to these sort of drawing, cartooning, all kinds of stuff. It was like a rich visual art collection scattered amongst the stories as well. So
oh, thank you. Yeah, I'm so glad that you know, worked and landed. Like, you know, like I say, when my mind is actually so like gonzo, like there was way more illustrations in the book. You know? But imagine that then reality check happens and you're sitting there calling Anheuser-Busch trying to get the rights to that African calendar that they this was literally it was Anheuser-Busch beer company. I called so many people trying to get the actual calendar. So just and then they had donated the calendar to the individual art pieces to HBCUs. So I'm calling HBCUs and asking them, can I get this, Kings and Queens of Africa calendar? So it's interesting. So, I try to leave as much art as that I could in, but in my fantasy world, even in Kinks, there was going to be a graphic of an African hair braiding salon, and then you were going to call the number, and I was going to buy the number, and then when you called, it was going to tell you the story of Kadajatu. So the African hair braiding story would be on the number on the card. So that's how my mind works, So I was like, when are you going to have time to do that? You were literally pulling QR codes. I was writing glossaries. I was writing soundtracks, and I was like, Nana, just fall back a little bit. But I do have that. That's the way my mind works. And yes, very, very much so with the Comic-Con story. It was a crack from the beginning. Ditto with Schoolyard Cannibal, which is very much concerned with the idea of images and imagery and depiction of of African bodies and so those images that I that you see of Warner Brothers and the kind of Looney Tunes, soft racism of that time, that was very much, those were images that I knew were going to be in the book from the very beginning, because those were the images that that were part of my upbringing and my, development, and that I had seen, like I said, talking to Faith about trying to do some unlearning at a very early age. Like if you're a child watching a cartoon and you see these cannibalistic Africans, with spears and they're playing the jungle with their butts, you're like, oh, is that what Africa is, mommy? So it happens very, very early, these little things start coming, kind of brainwashing you very early. So I knew that from the very get, that sometimes, I knew that I was going to describe what was seen, but because that piece was so concerned with images, that it made sense also for just have the reader to kind of look at these things also and make their own, draw some conclusions from, independent of what I said. Ditto with Comic-Con, I knew that, blurred that I am writing about graphic novels, and I teach a graphic novel course as a professor and enjoy talking to my students about themes in Watchmen, and and talking about the new remake with Regina King, all those things. I just knew that I was going to have a visual element, and I did collaborate with the artists in Schoolyard Cannibal, the artist, because I could not get that Kings and Queens of Africa piece. I ended up having one of my wonderful graphic artist friends make the pieces that you have in there, which are the African map, and having the words, represent some of the kind of Black history, Black present and past, and try to understand those words and visually represent how have them kind of be a punch in terms of what people's thoughts and notions of the continent were. And also for the rain check at MoMoCon, I was working with, this was literally once again, because I have such fantastical notions, I didn't know this final piece was going to end up in the book. I was like, oh, let me just get somebody on freelancer.com. I was like, let me just, so that when I'm now trying to sell the book, that they won't say, what do you mean, Nana? What do you mean? So I really literally had to write a prospectus and kind of describe the scene that I knew that I wanted to have visually, since this particular character has all these MIDI-esque, flights of fancy, and it has these really technicolor and vivid, almost hallucinatory moments, where she's, thinking very vividly. I was like, oh, I want to have that depicted. And so I just got somebody who I saw was talented, a freelancer, and just said, okay, I'm going to buy, I want to buy a piece just so I can show my publisher what I'm talking about. And they liked the final image, and we ended up using it. So, that's kind of how it came to be. So it was a joy to collaborate with, all these people. And like, I think that's the best way to go, like, just work with people and have them try to bring that vision to light. Because when I try to get sometimes the images, like I literally was calling Germany because like, like the director of the Shaka Zulu films and what have you, I'm calling South Africa. It's just, it becomes a little bit of an interesting, like, paper chase, but it worked out in the end. Thank you, Eva.
And there is a QR code at the end. We do get
yes, there is.
And I love that piece. That was so fun.
I'm glad you guys see. Nobody like. I'm always wondering, like, do people even know there's a QR code? Because I was just like, how can I push people to go and look at the content that I have so painstakingly amassed for them? So I was like, let me sneak a QR code in there so they can have a little fun and scan it with their phones.
Oh my gosh, yeah, no, I mean, yeah, this is the kind of stuff that my students and I are always really interested in. So I was like, how do you do that within a book? Because there's like, if something exists, if it's digital writing, then you can do more things like that. But what is something that can still be a book and do that? So I was really excited to see the different ways you kind of broke outside the two-dimensionality.
I mean, I wanted this book to be, especially when I knew that they were going to be doing an ebook, I was just like, oh my God, I get to even be more multimodal. Can I have like them actually have video? But they were just like, no, the book that you're talking about, like it would be so slow to load up on the average e-reader because like everything that you want to do is like, so I think that's something like, my fantastical future where I would love like, like the very videos I'm talking about, like that you see in the in Schoolyard Cannibal, that you could see those videos, like that like the glossary words could be highlighted and pop up, and and then you could hear the voice of somebody speaking in. Like literally, I'm like, I've got an actress like reading out all the pidgin English words, and I'm like slowly adding them to my glossary online. So because that's the kind of stuff that I would love to see in an ebook, just like having all those kind of different immersive technologies in that space. So, but my ebook is just words. Words. It is what it is. Like I said, sometimes I throw it out there, like, and I'm just like, is this possible? I it doesn't hurt to ask, right? And it was like, it would take people 10 hours and just to open up one page. It's like, no, it's not being crazy. But one day the technology shall exist. So
exactly. One day. It's true. Yeah. So things are moving really quickly. That's super exciting. Okay, so I guess we're about to let you go. And I think, there are a couple more questions from Nia and Elizabeth.
I want to know what's behind you on the wall. That's Elizabeth's question. What is behind you?
So this actually, if you go to my website and look at my media kit, you can see more photos of this particular wall, because this is just a 4x4 panel of like this wall of books that I made with a friend for my I did an author photo, and I just had a photographer in Iowa. I was very much still a graduate student. It was all very kind of DIY, and we were just like just full of vim and vigor and ideas. And I just ended up like, sourcing like some palettes on Craigslist that were being given away for free, getting like books that were meant for like the, the dumpster, and just ended up, I had taken a Center for the Book class. And so I knew how to take apart books along their spine, and basically made like a 8x8 foot tall, and wide wall of books to be the backdrop for my author photo shoot. So this is just but a one humble 4x4 panel that I kept, and now I wish I could have them all. So I could just, people love them so much. I'm just like, I wish I had one for my office, for my bathroom.
Yeah, very nice.
Oh, that's so funny. That Center for the Book designed my book.
Oh, did they?
Yeah,
Oh.
because I wanted to, have stuff in the margins, and they were like, no. And then I got hooked up with someone there who's like, yeah, I know how to do that. No problem.
I mean, honestly, like I want the next book that I do, I want to have like all those, like, like all the ephemera where like, you open and there's a postcard. I love stuff like that. And I was just like, I just took a whole bunch of pictures of my Center for the Book. Like I came across like my folder from taking that class, and I had like a pamphlet book and all the things I'd hand sewn books, and I still have my awl and and I still have like my little X-Acto knife. I love that kind of stuff. I need to do another. I love everything that has to do with physical books. Like I got hooked on fonts. I'm like, oh, I'm only writing in Calibri. I'm only typing in Calibri for a while. I got hooked on, like, I was very, very specific that I wanted just even the texture. I wanted this to feel like, multi-dimensional. So I'm a little bit geeky about that stuff. I was just like, send me a couple of blacks so I can know what is it, a matte black? Is it a velvety black?
Just like black.
I was just like, I need to see all the versions of blacks, and I need to see the fonts, and I need to make sure that you do a humanist font for the epistolary moment. So I'm just like, all right, but I just love books, so
It does feel really good.
I know, right? That's why I was just like, they were kind enough, what was really lovely, they were kind enough to kind of do some redesigning so that I would be allowed to kind of have this kind of dimensional, like cowrie shells. The first version of the book was like this cowrie shells were much smaller, but they made them larger so that I could allow for this kind of textural feel. And I'm so happy because those are the kind of things that just give me so much life because I'm just ridiculous that way. It's just ridiculous. I love it.
That's wonderful. That's great. Thanks whoever dropped the website in the.
I think you said there was another question.
Yeah, Nia. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
My question was kind of answered. It was about the QR code that linked to the blog and the sister story online. If there's any more context you can share about writing that one. And I know you talked about the kind of multi-dimensional elements of the book. So I love that already. But if you have more context for the story, that would be wonderful.
Yeah, so that story, Kinks, right? I referenced that particular blog post, and I thought I was going to keep that in the book, and but I don't know I'm trying to remember whether what happened, because the book actually started getting pretty long, and it's just like that also had images. So I had more images, and I was just like, oh, Nana, you're a little bit much. But they were very, I was just saying, maybe this is something that I would have to, if I could add the QR code and make this something that's in conversation with, with an additional material on my website, then maybe the website would allow me to do other things. So, I mean, even though I've done the blog, I was like, there are other things that I still want to do with it. I want to put video in there, what have you. But as is right now, it allowed me to speak in yet another voice. And that voice is a very kind of Retta, internet speak. And I just loved, it's funny. And I got to use a lot of humor. It's, so I just love the opportunity to kind of play and work and write in different veins and registers. And that was the joy of writing that particular piece. And just having a kind of one-off fun, dive into the dating life and the DMV, the different types of guys that you should, avoid or get, I thought, so I'm literally making them up it was just fun. Basically, I was just having a wild time writing it. So, and then some people were just like, I dated that guy, and I'm just like, oh,
oh yeah.
Just like, oh, that's hilarious. I love it.
That's so funny. Yeah, I love that.
I was like, it's not real advice. I'm not a real advice columnist, but I'm glad. But if you want it, if you read this and something resonated with you and it saved you some heartache, I'm glad. So.
It's like that website, Girl Don't Date Him. I was like, yes.
Oh my God, I have to check that out. I've never heard of
that.
Yeah,
it's hilarious. Not nearly as well written as what you did. But
I look forward to reading it. Thank you. I love to learn learning new things.
That's so great. Thank you so much for your generosity and fantastic responses to our questions and just bringing your energy. We really, really appreciate it.
So much.
Yeah.
Oh, I'm so gratified to be here. And Pamela, I don't know, you give me a run for my money, with that reading. I was feeling all the tears coming. Oh, wonderful. And thank you, Eva, for your questions about the ekphrastic nature of the book. I mean, I constantly think about those things, and those are the things it's like the word nerd in me and the visual nerd in me is so gratified to see that resonates with people when they're reading the book as well. Because sometimes you do it and you're just like, I don't know, whether people just gonna be skipping over that, That's a visual. Let me get over to the words again. So I'm so glad that it was like, that it enriched your reading of the texts as a whole. So thank you all. I'm very, very happy to be here today.
Thank you.
And I'll unmute for our appreciations. Thank you.
And Faith, I have this, I do not know how we know all the same people have not run into each other yet, but
I
it'd be
know,
nice.
it's crazy.
Yes.
But yeah, let's. I'd love to stay in touch.
Yeah.
Fantastic.
Thank you, Nia. Thank you, Elizabeth, for helping put this together. I'm so grateful. This was such a fun time.
Well, and if you're in the Bay Area, we would love for you to come to the museum.
Oh, absolutely. Like I get to go to a museum like named MoAD. It's just like I feel like badass just hearing it. I love it.
Thank you so much for being here.
All right.
This is a side note. Can you hear me?
Yeah, we can hear you.
You might want to check the little the chat in reference to the discussion of fonts. There was an exhibit called the Black Index Collection of Art, and the organizers designed a whole new font for the works. So I know there are endless rabbit holes that one could go down of interest.
I'm ready. I'm about to go down that rabbit hole right now. I'm writing that down.
Yeah, the curator was Bridget Cooks, professor at UC Irvine.
Thank you so much. I will check the chat because that's the kind of thing that I just will completely just lose myself over. I mean, I
realize
you have just done it now.
I too have trouble focusing sometimes when there's so many interesting things to look at and read and listen to. Thank you for today.
Yeah, they give me such joy. Like the little blue stocking kid that I was. Like I was constantly just reading and just so books have been like my constant besties and friends. So everything around about them, so that kind of making your own font and just that act of creation and just like pushing language in different ways, it just makes me so happy.
Wonderful.
Thank you again for joining us. We really appreciate it.